People who have signed an NDA that's now expired, what's the story? I worked for a mall pretzel stand about 25 years ago and had to sign an NDA about the secret pretzel ingredient. It was baking soda. The Nokia 7110 will have a scroll wheel. There it is. So glad I could finally talk about it. Also, the release wasn't delayed because of problems with the operating system, but rather because the entire development team caught a rather bad flu. Probably from me. I'm so sorry. I was a game tester at EA. I could not talk about what I saw. I was testing FIFA, so nothing new to see though. As security chief, I found that my boss, the region security manager, was stealing. At that time, I thought to keep things in the family. Imagine the scandal that, in the security branch of a nationwide mobile phone company, one of the people in charge of security was caught doing what he was supposed to prevent, i.e. me. So I reported directly to the CSO who, after getting a confession, asked the culprit to resign. After that, he placed his 24-year niece, or something, family related, in the region management. Then, after 2 months, fired me. A year later, I found out that the first boss was indeed the CSO cousin who ordered his niece to fire me in retaliation. Wiser me knows now to bring those things directly to HR. Used to be an au pair for a famous couple's children. NDA was there to protect the family. I wasn't allowed to take pictures of the kids on any of my devices. The photos I did take were not allowed to include their faces, and the rest were just general rules about not sharing their private information. Even to this day I won't sell that information even though the NDA has expired. Probably some of the nicest people I have ever worked for. I had an artist. He told me he was known all over the world. Have me sign an NDA when I was a young website designer. He wanted a site to promote his new sculpture idea. I recall it was a group of kids holding hands in a circle. It looked okay, but not unlike any sculpture you'd see outside a public library. This guy was saying it would lead to world peace and such. The requirements for the website were crazy detailed, like 40 pages of instruction. It had diagrams of how I should use the mouse to make blur effects and similar bullshittery. I remember we were going over his vision after I signed the NDA and vividly thinking, oh, this guy is just plain crazy. After 10 minutes I said I had an emergency and had to go and just never talked with him again. I have been a part of a focus group program for over 10 years now. It's mostly opinion chat sessions, but there were occasional times where I would test or try out some new product that I'd have to sign an NDA for. You remember when HP started that line of mini laptops? Yup, beta tested those. Some other things now on the market I've tested before release were Gillette's Fusion, Facebook Dating, Xbox Project X Cloud, and yes, they pay wonderfully. I got into a super small alpha test of a game in 2014. It was a new survival game. One of those where you build during the day and try to survive the night. And let me tell you, the game was so meh. I played in a small server for about 4 hours and was so bored I just stopped playing for the rest of my access time. There were all kinds of issues. Not with the tech, but just glaring flaws in how the game worked. Some resources were way too abundant. Some were really rare. There was practically no music. And the guns were dull. We also completely broke the enemy army by building a jump pad to get up to a floating platform that required using your air control. So the zombies couldn't get up to us. The game was Fortnite. The feedback on that alpha we played was so bad they basically took the whole game back into development until the version came out. What we were playing was a pretty early version of Save the World, except it was more like a typical survival game. No BR back then, as you might expect. Edit. The more I think about it, the more I'm convinced this was in 2013, not 2014. I was still living in a dorm in college, so it couldn't have been any later than May 2014. Rustic hairpin table legs and shelving brackets, sold on Etsy, are bent with a modified pneumatic wood splitter. I know everyone was dying to know that. I did an advert for what was at the time HTC's biggest swing into ultra high-end phone technology. I was allowed to hold the phone during filming and a guard put it in a suitcase at all other times. I was not to talk about the phone until it was on sale to the general public. Pretty lame now, but I had tech friends who knew I did the ad grill me about stuff. I wasn't even allowed to say what color it was. Give me another month and a half and I'll be free and I can tell you everything. I was hit by a Walmart 18-wheeler. I was on the freeway minding my own business, almost done passing him, when he decided to merge into my lane. The rotation from his tires between my door and the frame welded the door closed and completely destroyed the rear axle, which ripped off the frame. FWD. Engine still kicked over and drove it up on the trailer at a decent angle. Took everything in my power to stabilize the car and keep control. The trucker just kept driving. I was fortunate a car behind me witnessed the whole thing, stopped, checked if I was okay, then drove up to find the dude accessing the damage to his truck at a gas station a little further up. They got the license plate for me so they could come back and give it to the officer for the report. I know I could have sued for a pretty penny, but my only requests were A. My medical bills be covered. Only had whiplash. Other than that, I was unharmed thankfully. B. I wanted to know for a 100% fact he lost his license and would never have the capability to do what he did to me to someone else. Received a call about a month later letting me know my hospital bills had been paid. My check for my car should have arrived, and that he was in fact fired and had his license revoked. I signed the NDA with EA Games in order to pitch them a game idea that myself and 2 friends had developed. They turned us down due to there being a similar title already being in production. That was 10 years ago and there's still never been a game in even remotely the same vein as the one we pitched. Frustrating to say the least. Apple is developing an iPod that also allows you to make phone calls. I once had a job interview with a decent sized superstore kind of business. They required me to fill out a psychological testing survey to find out my strengths and weaknesses for the workplace. I was offered a job but didn't take it at the time. I had better offers come up. 2 years later, I decide hell, let's see what happens if I Google up my name. The second link to come up was a direct link download to the 9 pages of psychological evaluation that test produced on me. I was young and dumb at the time and having trouble finding work. I called the store up and gave it fit to the manager. He contacted his manager, and overnight I sent the company into a panic. The CEO got involved and they took it down within 2 days. After that, I started harassing them for compensation. I should have talked to a reasonable lawyer, but I only saw freebies who didn't know what to say about this unique situation. After 2 weeks of angry phone calls and emails, the lawyer this company hired contacted me and offered me $3,000 hush money and I took it out of desperation and ignorance. I really wish I opened up the whole can of worms and brought it to more knowledgeable people. The company told me my psychological report was the only one that was part of this leak. But I highly doubt that and I wonder how many other people had their psychological evaluations available for download online. I would have likely never found out if I wasn't the only person in the world with my name. In some ways, thank God when I Google myself I'm the result. I interviewed for a position at Amazon Web Services a few years back and had to sign an NDA. There wasn't anything too interesting other than realizing just how many Northern Virginia buildings are owned by Oz even before the HQ2 brouhaha started. It's a lot of nondescript buildings all over the place. From a secondary source, but trustworthy, John Travolta is gay. His partner was sick in the hospital. He came to visit him many times. Whole floor was emptied and everyone in the floor had to sign an NDA. But yeah, those rumors are true. Weird how they started way back then. I did some IT stuff for a state government, a couple actually, but only one had me sign an NDA. Nothing terribly interesting other than there is so little for tourists to do in the state that they photoshopped people kayaking in the super polluted river that no one would dream kayaking in. Even worse, they listed attractions from the next state over as something tourists could do while visiting them. Sadly I can't share details as they may have me killed. Joking. Maybe. I was in the wedding industry a few years ago and was selected as part of a team to be involved in a famous wedding for the sibling of a very famous UK resident. I was a minor in this so never spoke to her but I did have to move for a while for this particular wedding. People in this industry talk whether you like it or not and if you're close with the upper hands you get the juice. I have many stories but I'll stick to one. The reason the girlfriend of another famous UK resident was not invited to the ceremony is because she was not welcome. It wasn't because of protocol. The bride's family did not want her there. Period. The girlfriend tried really hard to get a winning ticket in but no chance. Apparently she likes taking personal pictures without permission and logging stuff in journals for a rainy day, so she scheduled a paparazzi shoot. This guy had designed a toilet that would register every time it was pooped in and chime in with encouraging words. This was designed to help potty train kids. I used to design and produce custom products. Clients would come to us with an idea and pay for prototypes and then production. I've designed products you see every day, and others you don't see but are part of your daily life. Also many classified military products and projects. I was bound by an NDA to my employer. I am named as inventor in many patents, but due to the nature of my employment the company I worked for owned the patents. Worked for an ultra famous, multiple Oscar winning actor. He was developing an espionage movie as a pet project. I was hired as a researcher. Mostly I found him people in the spy business to talk to. I would read everything available on the person. Usually there wasn't much, but I could at least learn everything publicly known about the institution they worked for. I would brief him and together we would conduct the interview with the screenwriter. He wanted the project to proceed in complete secrecy, which under normal conditions would be impossible. People like meeting movie stars and they can't help talking about it. If we were researching any other arena, word would get out. The cool thing about talking to spies is that they keep secrets for a living. We interviewed a former head of the Mossad, a former head of Shin Bet, the guy who ran the Mujahideen in Afghanistan for the CIA, the guy who ran the Contras in Nicaragua for the CIA, and even a former Mossad agent the Mossad was trying to kill. Not one peep ever became public. Over the years some of those contacts became friends of the movie star. This is unusual. It's hard for movie stars to have friends. Apparently professional spies are good at it. When you are ultra famous, the people you value most are the ones who keep their mouths shut. My family had to sign an NDA to learn where my great aunt lived. When her mom died she moved into a group home but people don't like group homes for some reason and the group home, apparently intellectually disabled people freak them out. IDK had to keep their presence a secret. It's all really weird and super unnecessarily cloak and dagger. Only my grandparents actually signed the thing so if there's a family event they have to be the one to pick her up for it. My cousin is also moving to a group home soon this year, but her group home has no problem letting people know where they are so I really have no clue whatsoever why this other one does. I worked on the browser for a couple of Nintendo devices back in the day. We had to black out the windows and work in isolation from the rest of the company with a curtain around the door so no one could see the device prototypes when we went in and out. The projects all had code names so no one else at our company would know what we were working on. We weren't allowed to talk about work at lunch in the canteen either. Still some of the best times of my career. The chat support people for Apple honestly have no friggin' clue on what the next product is. Hell didn't even know there was updates coming until the day of release where the techs get a crash course on it and turned loose. We don't know stop asking threatening bugging and then giving a TY survey. I hired a manager for a professional sports team. Nothing fascinating. Just that they were hiring a new manager then one got hired. The most interesting part is this kind of thing works a lot like any other higher level hire. I always assumed it'd work different but it really is just another job. I was a tester for CD copy protection. They sent us a CD with protection and let us play the game for a couple weeks and some test software to test on our machines to ensure it couldn't be copied. One time we were sent a game. The tests all passed and it was declared secure, but CD copy software from third party allowed all copies to work, and they released some games with this software not realizing that their copy protection sucked. Worked at a private low security sick ward years back so obviously had to sign the NDA as they were criminally insane. As in they were put there because they were too crazy for a regular prison. Let me tell you in the private institutes the healthcare team including the nurses and doctors do not really give a shit at all. As long as you're not fighting us it's fine. If you do start fighting you get put on the floor and held so the nurse can come running in with a needle to the ass to calm you down. That's about it. I was a science themed kid's birthday party magician. I had to sign an NDA and non-compete in order to be taught the experiments that I performed during the show. They're cool demos. I could even wow adults with some of them. but they're not that special. I guarantee you that I could find the experiments themselves on the internet or in a homeschool textbook. The flair and the showy part was all me, but all of us magicians were college students. So the NDA and non-compete were there to intimidate us a bit. The non-compete was important. The owner didn't want us stealing the experiments and create a competing company, but the NDA was just saber-rattling to keep us compliant with the NC. It was worth it. He paid us well and the tips were usually pretty good, but the NDA and the NC expired a decade ago. So if you want, I can spill the secrets. Played in the orchestra for a diamond company at a number of their Christmas parties they threw a few years ago. After the Kardashian heist in Paris, they didn't want us sharing where and when the parties were until well after the parties were over for security reasons. My very first NDA I signed was with Microsoft for Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020 beta test after many months of waiting. Signed up right after the announcement. My story's short. I couldn't download it from the Teams Windows Store. Never got to try the beta. Worked on a Star Wars movie. Movie was a pile of ducking it. Every voice query you say into your phone is recorded. Installed a bunch of flooring at Derigold years back and they made sign an NDA. I think they were afraid I was going to steal the Colby Jack recipe. I worked as a producer at a local news station in North Carolina and my NDA just expired last month after leaving the job in 2019. I thought it was a bit odd that we had a very detailed and thorough set of rules on mentioning the personal views behavior of the talent who worked at the station, but after like a week on the job I realized why. Basically, half the people you see on TV, even in the local news, are absolute tyrants. The other half are nice but are generally just talking heads with little substance. It was disappointing and I realized then why we had to keep our lips shut while we worked there. Call of Duty. They have some weird mechanics that they try out sometimes. Nothing major. I worked at a now defunct store and we all got told we wasn't allowed to talk to the press if we were approached or post on social media and had to sign contracts to say we wouldn't. The instructions came specifically from the administrators who came in to save as many jobs and stores as possible. The rescue administrators just sold everything off and then made the entire company redundant with no notice and pretended that we had been told right from the start that this would happen, which in reality was not the case at all. Looking back now, it was probably a sign that the company was well and truly done for, but at the time we were just focused on trying to keep our jobs and our heads above water. So nobody questioned any of it or questioned why we had to sign those forms. A few years later they were taken to court and found guilty and ordered to pay each of us our notice pay, which we never originally got as we never received notice, because they never told us we was on notice. So they broke the law. They don't generally come with expiry dates. Nothing remotely interesting. I was a payroll officer and 401k trustee, so it was just personal and privileged information. Like, you know how you can't legally be prohibited for talking about salary? In my case I couldn't, because I had access to everyone's pay rate. I suspect most NDAs are similarly boring. I still won't talk about anything I remember because nobody cares. I worked as a contractor for Hewlett-Packard. I wasn't allowed to tell people about the stuff we were working on. Most people who work at companies like that sign NDAs. They're very common and completely mundane. I sign many NDAs. I provide various services for movie and television production. The NDAs are mostly plot protection. There's other reasons, but those NDAs haven't expired. While I was in college I would pick up side gigs from Freelancer and other websites. One of these jobs, writing some simple code to analyze potential properties for a real estate investment group, became pretty steady and I was asked to sign an NDA. The NDA was one of those boilerplate ones you could buy at an office supply store. It all felt pretty sloppy and my client never struck me as very competent in the field. But the pay was always on time and the work was steady. So NBD. As time went on, I realized I was just doing some random guy's job for him. I spent about 2.5 years doing it. It was incredibly easy and I taught myself some things that have come in handy since. I was studying physics at the time, so my computer science background was pretty rudimentary. I wrote a scraping tool to comb MLS listings, then some simple VBA code to do an analysis in Excel. After an initial 60 hours or so to get things set up, I spent on average 4-5 hours a week on it and was paid between $12 to $18 per year. All in all, it was a great gig. I'd totally do again. Ruben Studdard's Burger King order. We were not allowed to talk about the massive amount of food he ate. I worked on those Konomo high-posts and see-through displays you see in GIFs and stuff online. They were supposed to be much better, but we cut a lot of features due to cost and the thing's just breaking. I personally think they're mega ducking stupid and non-viable form of display. You can't really pipe an image in. It has to be a video on a SD card. Also, that company didn't pay me all the way, so duck 'em. I was young and naive, and I bought a puppy from a pet store. They swore to me she was not from a puppy mill and that they ethically source their dogs. Well, they lied. My good Leafy was strong back then, and from the limited information I had, I was able to find out more about the dog's breeder. Turned out it was a farm that failed multiple inspections and had 50+ dogs living in cages eating their own feces. Puppy ended up with femoral head necrosis. They wanted me to put her down and they'd give me a new puppy, but I lawyered up. Ended up with them paying for my dog's surgery and I had to sign a NDA. They've been out of business for a long time now. Anyways, don't ever buy a dog from a pet store. Get a rescue. Used to work for a company that installs acrylic showers. The walls are cheap plastic, and the fixtures were no different than what's at Home Depot or Lowe's. The problem was that materials were maybe $1,000 and labor was less than $500 day, usually 1 day install, but we were charging customers $8-12,000. I knew it was a massive ripoff and resigned from selling overpriced plastic showers to old folks. I did make good money working there, but it didn't sit on my conscience well. Pretty much every NDA I've ever signed was just, don't talk about this product until it's released. So I don't really know anything that isn't now public knowledge or still under NDA. I was in the closed alpha beta tests for a few AAA video games and all I can really reveal about those is that any huge technical issues players had shortly after release were probably discovered during the beta and reported by hundreds of people and still weren't fixed. Cough anthem cow. I was an extra on Doctor Who and when I arrived I was given an NDA that I couldn't talk about any storylines I was privy to or say to anyone about being an extra until the show aired. Problem was I'd already told everyone because I was really excited.